Hi, Matt.
Hey, Jackie, what's going on?
Well, I am trying to watch a bunch of movies I've never seen. Do you want to know which one I want to watch next?
I'm almost afraid to ask. Go ahead.
You should be afraid because it's about a very scary shark. It's Jaws.
What? No, no way. No, you've never seen Jaws.
No, I have never seen Jaws. I guess I also don't really have a fear of swimming in the ocean, which is a good thing. I really don't actually know what it's about. I know, like, okay, baseline, all I know is shark terrorizes town. Like, that's really all I've got.
So what gave it away that it's about a shark? Just gotta.
Well, I'm gonna go with literally the one movie poster that I've seen, which is like the
Right.
bloody shark mouth
Yeah. So
thing.
let's talk about that poster for just a second. I really want to talk about that poster because it is truly one of the most iconic movie posters of all time.
I would agree.
Yeah, so like I remember when I was like first getting into movies when I was like 10 or 11 years old. This was around the time when a lot of like the old Hollywood movies were having like their 15, 20-year anniversary, so they were releasing like these big DVD sets, or in my case I didn't have a DVD player yet. This is when DVDs were still new. And I had a bunch of these like two VHS sets. I had one of Jurassic Park. I'm pretty sure I had one of like the original Planet of the Apes, and I had one of Jaws. And one of the other things about these special editions is that they always had like this cool new box art, new cover art, but the cover of Jaws has remained consistent since its inception. There has never been any need to change the cover of Jaws. That is such an iconic poster and such an iconic image of the shark swimming up towards the swimming woman that is just it tells you everything you need to know about the movie. Almost.
Oh, well, almost. Okay, well, apparently I need to go watch it. So once I watch the movie and apparently develop a fear of sharks, I will let you know and we'll talk about this iconic piece of cinema.
I cannot wait.
Welcome to Jackie Watches Stuff. This is a podcast chronicling my cinematic quest to finally watch the movies I probably should have already seen. And I'm bringing my friends along with me. Dun, dun, dun,
What's happening? What's
dun,
happening?
dun, 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 dun. I mean, I
You've
knew
seen
that before.
Jaws!
I've seen Jaws. Like, I knew it before, but now that I've seen it, it like really like it just sounds a little bit different when you sing it, you know? Like it just sounds a little different.
Yeah. Man, now I fully endorse you just referring to it as the dun 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 song from now
Yes.
on.
I didn't know. I looked it up and it is just called like main theme from Jaws, but I've been calling it the Dun Dun song, which I think everybody knows, unless you're thinking the Dun Dun from Law and Order, like very different Dun Dun.
I
Like
mean, that's not really a dun dun. That's more of a kung kung. Maybe I don't know. I don't really hear a D when I think of that sound effect.
oh, interesting. See, I hear it
Yeah.
as Dun Dun, and so now I guess I'm hopeless. I don't know. There's so many Dun Duns in my life now that I've seen Jaws. What am I ever gonna do with
Yeah.
myself?
Yeah. That
Oh
song is
man.
it's not used sparingly. It comes up pretty often.
Oh, yes, and I have a lot of thoughts on the use of music in in this movie that I would like to hit as we go through the plot. But before I do that, I have to do my tradition of trying to summarize this entire movie, this 2-hour-long movie in 30 seconds. Will you time me?
Absolutely. I've got a timer right here. So
Oh, thank
ready,
goodness. Okay.
set, go.
Okay, so there's a spot on an island and it's a resort, and everyone comes there for the summer, and it's really great because we all lay out on the beach. But then this year, there's this big shark attack because there's this naked girl in the water and she dies. And so the chief of police is like, oh my God, we have to close the beach. And the mayor's like, no, we have to keep it open because I don't care about death. I just care about money. Mwahaha. And they didn't care. So the chief freaks out because he's like, no, there's really some shark attacks and some other people die. And I think a dog dies. We're not quite sure. And then they keep trying to go find and kill the shark. And then they try to kill a shark, but it's the wrong shark. And they go out with a creepy guy named Whale or whatever.
Fine.
And oh, I didn't
Yeah,
even
you
get to the
got through
part
the
when the
first
shark
half of the
blows
movie,
up.
basically.
Oh, it was such a good first half of the movie, though. It was
Yeah,
such
there's
a good first half.
definitely two very distinct halves to this movie. Like the first hour is kind of them on the island dealing with the greedy mayor and everything, and then the last hour is kind of almost like the swashbuckling part of the movie.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. Is it's like part like the second half of it is an action adventure movie, and the first part is just kind of like a I don't want to say a drama. That gives it a little too much credit, but it's certainly not quite the same vibe
Well, I
in
mean,
the
I think we
first
should
gen.
give this movie all the credit in the world, because of how influential it was, and it created the modern blockbuster. All the blockbusters you've enjoyed in your life would pretty much not have happened without this movie. Like this
I
movie
mean,
created the summer blockbuster. Star Wars kind of came along and cemented it a few years later.
I will definitely
But
admit that when I was like hitting play, I don't I and I know why. I thought I was getting into like Sharknado. Like I was prepping myself for like cheesy animatronics, like cheesy blood effects, and I think it's because all of the other shark movies I've watched have been really really bad, like, oh no, the shark's attacking, run away. But this was like, pretty believable. And I mean, I to put myself back in like the 1975 mindset of watching like a monster giant shark on TV or on the movie screen attack these poor innocent vacationers, like that is pretty scary.
yeah, and Jaws is definitely mostly responsible for those bad shark movies you've watched. Even like in the immediate aftermath of this movie's release, there were a lot of copycats that came out. Mostly, pretty much all of them involving, some animal attacking tourists somewhere. Like there was one that was about a grizzly bear. I think it was just called Grizzly, but I can't quite remember. The two most famous
Original.
ones were probably Piranha, which you may have heard of, and there was another one called Orca, where they were hunting like a gigantic whale. It actually starred, if I recall correctly, it starred Richard Harris, the first guy to play Dumbledore in the Harry Potter movies.
Oh, now I need to go back and watch that.
Yeah, I've never actually seen it, but yeah, that would be a fun one to watch for
Well,
sure.
we'll add it to the list then. Clearly it's not well known if you haven't seen it. Like that's my most of my calibering is like, has Matt watched it? Okay, then it's worth my time.
I am aware of its existence.
Okay, well, more killer sea animals, I guess, is the next season. All killer sea animals.
Oh man, I got to do all of them then.
Oh man. Like, I mean, you have to put Sharknado on the list for that too.
Definitely, definitely.
Goodness. All right, well, let's get into this movie. It does start with the Dun Dun song, the dun dun dun.
Yes.
But then we cut over and there's like teens being teens on the beach, which truly I wasn't quite expecting. I thought I was going to see a shark attack off the top. We see lots of 70s hairstyles and clothing choices, very solid to watch in the 2020s. And it starts with, I don't want to say iconic, but like I think it definitely sets the tone of the movie when we see this like drunk dude following this like kind of drunk pretty girl running into the water, gonna go skinny dipping, and then we see her get attacked by a shark. It happens so fast. It
It
happens
does.
so
Those underwater
fast.
shots are incredible.
It's crazy.
Just
I mean, it's super. I knew that scene, or not even the scene, but just like the legs swimming underwater. I think everybody knows that, whether they've
mhm.
seen Jaws or not. But off the top, it's like, here we go, killer
Yeah,
shark.
I remember my first time seeing this movie. I think I was like 10, maybe 11 years old. And I was already really, interested in Steven Spielberg. I'd gotten into watching movies. I'd seen a bunch of his movies. And so there was a book in my grade school library that I checked out probably half a dozen times and read through as many times. And they described the opening scene in that book. So I thought I was ready for it when I first watched this movie. But I kind of assumed she would just get like pulled under and it would just be, that would be it. I was
Hmm.
not quite prepared for her to be like jerked around violently, screaming it hurts for a solid minute.
Yeah. And I found out how they actually did that because I thought that was her, like, kind of just pushing her, like, pulling herself under the water kind of a thing.
Hmm.
There were two crew members underwater that were pulling on weights that were attached to her legs and, like, truly surprising her and jerking her under the water, which I feel like is not the safest way to go about shooting this scene. But,
No,
like,
probably not.
that's also probably half the reason why she looks so terrified is because she genuinely had no idea when she was going to get pulled under the
And I
water.
mean, like, none of the shooting of this movie was honestly that safe. It was the first movie ever to be shot out in the open ocean.
Oh my God. I
So
mean,
so they're playing around with tides. That's why so much of the movie got delayed. That's why it went over budget. That's why it took way longer to shoot than they thought it would because they just kind of had no idea what they were doing. They were flying from the seat of their pants for a lot of the time.
oh my God. I mean, some of the greatest are made that way.
They are, yeah. I mean, like one of the great things that is always pointed out about this movie is how you never see the shark until like halfway through,
Hmm.
and that was kind of by necessity. The mechanical shark that they were going to use kept malfunctioning, so he had to create these very cool underwater shots in order to just imply the shark for a lot of it, and it works way better than it would to just have the shark, leap in the air and like come down on her.
Well, yeah, I mean, truly, when we see all those like iconic underwater shots of like we see all the swimming legs, it like shows all the people like which one's going to be the target, which one's going to be selected as like today's lunch by the great white.
Yeah.
So I agree that they're like much better. I read that Steven Spielberg called the mechanical shark the great white turd because it kept malfunctioning. So clearly
Yeah,
it was a
I
huge
seem to remember
issue.
that. Yeah.
That is too funny. But yeah, so this is like a crazy opening scene. It's like right off the bat, like you said, like instead of her just sinking under the water and being like, "What happened?" It's like she got murdered, and we watch her get
Yeah,
eaten.
I remember when when we see her remains on the beach later, your comment was, "Well, she's very dead."
She's very dead. Also, that hand that's like sticking out of the sand, the dead girl, is not a prop hand. It's one of the female crew members because Steven Spielberg didn't like the prop hand. He thought it looked too fake. So they actually buried this poor crew member. So that was a real person. So she was not very dead. She was very alive, just looking very dead. But yeah, they find her body and we find out it's because of a shark attack. Dun dun dun. And the chief is like, I got to solve this entire problem for this small beach town. But of course, we see the evil mayor. He's kind of painted as like the villain, but not as extreme. And he's like, no, we're going to keep the beaches open. Like, we just have
Yeah,
to.
like thank God we live in a world where our governments don't put the safety of the populace
I
at
know.
risk for for the sake of the economy. I mean, can you imagine if we lived in that world right now? God, how
No,
awful would that be?
it is pretty insane. Like, I get why he wanted to keep everything open. Like it doesn't like and they make the most money when the people go in the water, so we have to put people in the water. Like it just makes
Yeah.
sense. So
Now, in the book, there was a famously excised subplot from the book where one of the reasons that he wanted to keep the beaches open was because the town is actually under mafia control.
what?
And yeah, and so if there was now I haven't read the book. This is all from like reading other pieces on it.
Hmm.
But I believe that yeah, one of the subplots in the book is that Brody has to actually investigate his ties to the mafia, and he discovers that's why
Wow.
he's trying to keep the beaches open. Yeah,
How come
that
that what now I know I've never seen Jaws 2, but you gave me a little briefing on it earlier after I watched Jaws. I Why isn't that the plot of Jaws 2 instead of like there's another evil shark? Like I feel like that would have been a good movie. I would have so watched that.
I mean, would you have preferred like just the mafia without the shark, or could we have another shark and have the mafia?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I want it to be mostly mafia with like subplot of shark. Like, oh yeah, and there's a killer shark again. Darn. But really it's the mafia. Maybe the
I don't
mafia
know.
train the killer shark like at SeaWorld.
Oh
And
my
they
god!
bam, I
I
just
mean,
wrote Jaws two and a
that
half.
does sound that might have to be Jaws 5.
There it is. There it is. Steven Spielberg,
I,
call me. I'm
I mean,
free.
Spielberg was not involved in any of the sequels, so he's probably. I think he washed his hands of the sequels pretty thoroughly.
Oh, that
Uh,
tracks. That very
yeah,
much tracks. Well, maybe he'll want to join me for my Jaws 2.5 or Jaws 5 idea.
get
Mafia.
Amblin Entertainment on the phone.
Heard it here first, folks. Take
Yeah,
a
no one
take a
steal
note.
that. No one steal that.
No,
Copyright.
TM,
Copyright.
TM, TM, TM. I'm gonna have to ask Sean to cut that part out so that nobody steals my great plot idea. But in any case, we are back on the beach. The mayor is like, no, we're going to keep this place open. Chief is feeling a little uneasy. And then we watch like the chief be the most popular man in town because everybody is asking him favors while he's just staring like into the ocean, waiting for another shark. And he's definitely haunted. And of course, we see another shark attack. And to your point, we see another implied shark attack because I don't think we see the shark in this
No, like
scene.
you kind of see his fins a little bit. Like you see him kind
Oh,
of
that's
like
true.
swim. Yeah, you see the fins very briefly, but you don't like see the scary shark teeth yet.
Yes, that is a good point. In my notes, I wrote in all caps, the dog died, more na 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 na, kid dies, and there's a lot of blood. And I feel like that's all you need to know about that scene.
Yeah, there is a lot of blood in this movie.
A
For
lot.
this is rated PG in 1975. So like PG today is kind of like, hey parents, just so you know, some of the cartoon characters might fart some in this movie. and your kids will probably make some pretty crude jokes. No, back in the day, like PG meant parental guidance because we might scar your children for life.
I just can't believe it. And at this point, there was no PG-13 rating, so they couldn't even
There was
say
no
like,
PG-13.
"Oh,
No. A
this is
little bit of
like
trivia
probably not
though:
the
Steven
best
Spielberg was famously partly responsible for the PG-13 rating.
because of Jaws."
Actually, no, because of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and also
Wow,
Poltergeist, which he executive produced. He did not direct Poltergeist, or actually, there are rumors that he did, and it's just credited to Toby Hooper. But two movies that he was involved with pushed the limits of the PG rating. I mean, honestly, Jaws might be rated R today.
I'm
I don't
sure
know
it
if it
would
would be
be.
PG-13. Yeah, because there's a lot of blood in this movie.
So everybody's freaking out because of all of the blood, and they have this kind of like public meeting, I guess, because this town is so small, and they decide that there's going to be a $3,000 reward for anyone who kills this menacing shark, which kind of bothered. I mean, I know plot point that should annoy me is shark attacks, but also it annoys me that the main plot point of this entire movie is there is one evil shark and he is the shark that we need to find and he is responsible for all of these killings. Like we just assume it's the same shark and
Right.
like
So, I mean, I think the Hooper character kind of explains that, later on in the movie, how, this is a shark who has, wandered this close to land and now knows that there is a, food source here. So it's not going to go away. They can kind of safely assume it's one shark just because that's the way that sharks operate because of their territoriality.
that's fair.
Um, yeah.
I mean, I did get to work with, this is a shameless plug that I'm sure will get cut from this podcast episode, but when I had the chance to host and produce Well Said, the UNC storytelling podcast, I did get to speak with someone who studies sharks, and he told me all about how shark attacks work and how they're not actually that common, and it's really just sharks kind of responding to the fact that, like, hey, someone's in my environment and this is scary. Like, they're just trying mostly to protect themselves. It's not like a shark, like, actively seeking
Right.
humans
And
or
like
like
Jaws is certainly responsible for more shark deaths than it is people deaths. and,
I could
in
imagine
this
that.
fighting. Yeah.
I could absolutely imagine that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then we meet the one of the creepiest men in the world.
Quint.
um
Quint is such a badass.
Quint, who I called Quill during my 30-second recap out of sheer flustering. Yes, he is kind of sketchy, very typical fisherman. He does this like nail on chalkboard moment, which was
Famous shot. Love that
ugh,
shot.
don't love it.
Yeah, you cringed quite hard when
I
that happened.
did. And like, oh, we didn't talk about how listeners, Matt and I got to take advantage of the fact that we do live very close to each other and we're able to socially distance and watch this movie at the same time. So Matt had the pleasure of watching me watch this movie. So I'm sure he'll jump in with a lot of ridiculous moments that I caused. I mean, it was, wasn't fun. And so he basically is like, "Oh, I'll go find him and I'll kill him. But you have
But
to."
he'll
He
do it
said,
for
"I'll kill him for
$10,000.
$10,000." I was gonna say I'll catch him for 3, but I'll kill him for 10. The thing that was kind of weird about this scene is like everyone kind of looked at him as though it was like, "Who is this man?" And seemingly like you all have been here a while. This dude has clearly been here a while. Like, why are we all so surprised? Creepy fisherman dude is ready to go kill the shark. I don't know.
I get the impression that he's kind of a recluse. He lives out in. I mean, I guess I just assume he lives out in that shack they show where he's got all the shark teeth and everything hanging on the
Yes,
walls
which is
later on.
bananas.
Yeah, so there's actually a deleted scene where you would have met him earlier than this scene, and you can actually see this deleted scene if you watch it on TV sometimes,
Ooh.
where they show him going into a music store and buying like piano wire because the fish choke on it.
Oh my
And
God.
there's a kid in there who is like playing his clarinet, and so he's playing Ode to Joy on the clarinet, and Quint kind of goes over and just starts humming along Ode to Joy to try and mess the kid up. So this is definitely a guy who like lives in the area. He is known, but he is also probably avoided by most people.
But I feel like if I was in that room, I'd be like, "Yep, go for it. Like, good luck." Like, sounds great. Like, I'm going to be over here on the beach and not being hunted down by the evil shark. Dun, dun.
But I mean, people definitely try and earn that $3,000 as
Oh
we
my
later see.
God. There's like this mass. It's like, it reminds me of the scene in Beauty and the Beast when Gaston is rallying up the townspeople and he's like, there's a beast in the tower. We must go kill the beast. And they're like all with their pitchforks and they're singing about it. Like, I wanted this a little bit to be a musical, like this moment. Is there Jaws the musical? I feel like this is another opportunity. TM, 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 copyright, copyright. Like,
Well, I mean, I think you've kind of skipped over one of the better scenes, like the kind of the first people to go after the shark, the guys who like throw the meat out over the pier, and then the pier just gets demolished
oh
out
my
from under
goodness.
them.
I can't believe I forgot. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean that's basically what happens.
And they like they like basically find the shark, but he almost dies. Charlie, swim to me, Charlie.
Yeah, and he's just like, "Can we go home
Yeah,
now?"
and it's like, yes, you can. That's like such a. I wonder why that stayed in. Like, in
I mean,
this,
it's a great scene.
it's
It's super
hilarious, but
intense.
it's
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, I guess we did need another thrilling moment because we just watched
yeah.
a kind of a
And they do
downer.
reference it like right after that, where like they're walking and they're seeing everybody who's going out on the water. He's talking about, yeah, old man, had to go home and explain to his wife why all her cold cuts were gone.
Ah, yes, because he's like, this is my wife's roast. It better be worth it. It's like, did you think
Yeah,
the shark was going to be like, oh, hello, I see you dropped your roast. I brought it back to you. Like, that's not how this works, dude. Like, it's not going to be
yeah.
worth it.
I mean, I think you just explained why we needed that scene in this movie.
That's fair. Man, Spielberg should have hired me. That is for sure. But in any case, we then meet. Oh, and then we meet Matt Hooper, the researcher from the Oceanographic Institute, and he's like, "I'm here. I'm going to save the day. I know every single thing about sharks." And it's seemingly nobody likes him, like nobody. And I don't know if it's because people know it's like you're not an islander, because there is a moment where they talk about like, oh, are you an islander? Oh no, I'm not, I'm from New York. Like, I think there's this weird like, oh, you're not one of us
Yeah, and he's kind of
situation.
also walking around kind of just being a smartass, but
Yes,
he's also right about everything. So,
right. But also
yeah,
nobody listens. They're like, yeah, but we could
right.
just go try to kill it. And he's like, yeah, but also that's really hard.
Yeah, some of the best lines in the movie are his. We're like in this scene where he's going, they're all gonna die.
That is true. When they're all, it's
Yeah,
the mass horde of men just trying to go earn $3,000 into
yeah.
the river, or into the ocean rather, not the river.
Hmm.
Um, so we watch them go out in this horde after Matt shows up, and apparently they find the shark. It's like a 13-foot tiger shark. Matt, the researcher, is skeptical at best, and he's like, fuck this noise. He's like trying to push through the excited crowd as he's like with his little tiny tape measure trying to measure the width of the bite and the jaw. And I found out that that shark that they caught is not actually from the Martha's Vineyard area where they shot Jaws, because they couldn't find a shark that was big enough to suit the scene. So they had to fly a shark up from Florida to make it into the scene. So this was an imported shark, and it was also
Oh, that's
decomposing the
cool.
entire time.
I
Like,
mean,
why?
there are like that.
In any
I mean,
case. So
that
yes,
kind
that
of
was an
tracks just because
imported
there are
shark.
not, yeah, gigantic sharks like that roaming roaming
I
Martha's
honestly,
Vineyard. That
well, I truly thought that that shark was fake, and it makes me kind of sad to hear that it's an actual shark. That they were like, well, we can't recreate one. That sounds silly. Let's just get one from Florida.
yeah, I did not know that that shark was fake. That shark was real. I kind of assumed it was fake as well.
It's a real shark, and it is really in the process of decomposing, which it didn't look like it. Gotta say, that
No,
guy, for
well, I
being a
mean,
dead
it's
shark,
supposed to
looks
be.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's supposed to be freshly caught. But it, of course, as we later find out, the bite radius is all wrong.
Absolutely. It is all wrong. We have like the scene of excitement. We're taking pictures. I'm going to bring up a super small scene because it is relevant to today. The scene where the mother of the child who died in the ocean comes up and says, and looks for Chief Brody, and slaps him across the face. Found out her name is Lee Fierro. She actually passed away April of this year from COVID-19, which is very
She
sad.
did,
So,
yes. I remember seeing that article on the AV Club. She was
yes.
apparently an acting teacher out on Martha's Vineyard, and that's how she got the
Yes.
gig playing this role.
Which is not surprising to me, but also like very, very cool that
Hmm.
it was like local talent, for lack of a better
Yeah, all
phrase.
the extras apparently were local talent. I read another article from like a few years ago where like the guy who played the kid who got killed actually reunited with her. Like
I
she
saw
just
that
kind of
too.
She just kind of randomly came into the restaurant he owned or something like that.
Yes, and there's like a sandwich on his menu named after his character who died, which I think is like super morbid if you didn't know that the actor who played that kid was the owner of the restaurant.
It is.
So
R.I.P.
anyway, moving on to the movie about death, we cut over to Matt Hooper showing up to Chief Brody's house, like dressed to the nines for some reason. Not quite sure why we're wearing a suit and tie, but he shows up with wine and he's like, "Hey, I'm here. Let's talk about everybody that died." Like, real fun. And so basically, he tries to convince Chief Brody, like, "Hey, this is not the shark. Let's go cut him open and just see what's in his stomach." Like, that's normal dinner conversation. And meanwhile, Chief Brody's wife is like, "So you do shark things. Tell me about all the shark things you do." So they actually go and try to cut this shark up like at night after dinner. They're like, "Well, we better do this right now." So we watch him like cut up this shark. Now, I could not confirm if this shark we see in this scene that he is cutting open is also said decomposing shark from Florida. I'm going to assume the answer is no, but like, who knows at this point. And so we see him pulling out like these disgusting like heads of fish, a license plate, like tin cans, and
I
maybe
would
this was
very much like to
Spielberg's.
believe that that shark was. Now that I know that the first shark was real, I'd very much like to believe that that shark is real, and they just decide, all right, we're going to cut him open. We're just going to film it, just improvise based on what you find on his stomach.
Oh my god. That would be torture, but
That would be a great
also
story.
really stellar. I guess we'll have to try to dig
And
deeper. I
Richard
will.
Dreyfuss just finds a license plate in this shark's stomach and is just like, oh, well.
Yep. And I mean, that's the thing too. I forgot quite where we're supposed to be in this movie, but he pulls out that plate from Louisiana. And so it's like the shark kind of had traveled apparently, or it's like, or there was a car that was from Louisiana that was in the area, but whatever. It's fine. We
Yeah.
can't ask the shark. He's dead. So we decide, oh no, it's not the shark. So what are we going to do? The chief is semi drunk, tells Matt, "I've never been on a boat. I don't like boats. I don't like water," which this is like a thing that we drive home the whole time. Like his wife reminds us of it. He reminds us of it multiple times. He's like, "I don't like water. I don't like boats. I don't like those things." It's like, well, this is your life. Like this is where you live now. So, okay. And it
That's
doesn't
a very
seem.
Spielberg thing, is for the main characters to have like fears that they overcome. Like very specific fears too. Like, Indiana Jones and his fear of snakes is another big example of Spielberg doing this. Or like Robin Williams in Hook playing Peter Pan. He plays a Peter Pan who is afraid of heights.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Mm,
It's just a weird. I don't think it added anything to this storyline personally. Like
sure.
whether or not, like if he was like, "I love swimming. I'm Michael Phelps," I don't think it would have made this story any different.
No, probably not. It's definitely referenced heavily, and it's referenced in the final line, of course, of the
Yes.
movie.
Yes.
But it doesn't impact the plot terribly. No, you're right.
No. But in any case, even though he is super not down to go on a boat or go in water, he is kind of drunk, and Matt gets him on a small, tiny boat in the middle of the night because they decide they're going to go try to hunt the shark, I guess. Like the motive here was not very clear to me because they're on this dinky little boat. It's very late and the chief is drunk. So, like, what are we going to do here, boys? But
I mean, I think we're showing Hooper's overconfidence just a little bit here. I mean, he's always the smartest guy in the room. He probably thinks he can handle it, but then of course they drive out there, and he's like, "Oh, there's another boat that thought they could handle said
mm-hmm,
shark, and it's
mm-hmm.
underwater, and the crew is also very dead."
Yep. And they go and investigate, and we see this terrifying zombie thing fly out of one of the holes in the side of the boat, and it was not fun. Did not like.
I remember,
I
yeah,
don't.
that was not fun for you at all.
Oh my goodness, I don't like
Fun
haunted
story. It was, yeah,
houses.
it was also
Mm-mm.
not fun for my uncle. My dad told me the story of when he saw this movie in the theater. He went with uh, my uncle, and at that scene, my uncle got so scared that he threw his hands up in fear and like ripped the armrest
Oh my
right off the
god,
chair he was sitting in.
I would have done the same thing. It was
Yeah,
like,
it's a,
oh no. And I mean, I wasn't even watching this movie on like a giant movie screen. I was just watching this on a regular old television, and I was like, not down. And that head looked of all the fake limbs that we saw in this movie, that was like the most fake, but it still freaked me out
Yeah, the
so
timing is
badly.
great. It's a great suspense moment.
Ugh, so awful. So then he finally is like, all right, we should probably head back. I don't think we can handle this. Awesome. So of course we watch Matt, like you said, smartest guy in the room, go up to the mayor and flip a shit on him, freaking out, saying like, we have a problem. We got to get everybody off this beach. We got to close it down. I think we've already missed, it just came back to me, the scene where Chief Brody like goes into a convenience store and like gets his own paint and signs and like
Oh yeah,
makes his
that's at the
own like
very beginning.
beach
That's after they
clothes.
found the body of the first girl who got killed.
Yes. Okay. So we've already had the hysteria once over, and now it's going to happen again.
Yeah. And
And
of course,
basically,
Hooper is 100% right.
yes, but the economy, Matt,
The
the economy.
economy, that's right.
We need to keep the beach open.
At least one more person needs to die for this economy, otherwise it won't be satisfied.
Well, more importantly, this weekend is the 4th of July. We need to keep the
Hmm.
beaches open. It's our highest like day of the year. It makes us the most money. We have the most visitors, and we see kind of like the visitors all coming in. So like really there is no chance that this beach is going to get closed down. But then like even though presumably a lot of the people that we see on the beach in the next scene, like everybody's here, it's 4th of July, everybody's in red, white, and blue, there's tons of families on the beach, but nobody's in the water. So presumably word has already spread to like not only the people that were around for the first two shark attacks, but now to all these vacationers, like, hey, there's been shark attacks. It's not the most safe thing to go in the water. And
There's
so
also
nobody goes in.
definitely a massive police presence, floating
Yeah,
around. They're all out there on the boats. Clearly something is off, even if you don't know that there was a shark that killed 2+ people in this area in the past week.
absolutely.
Something does not feel right.
Right. It's like this does not like what's going on. Like you're waiting for something to happen. But we get a lot, and we had talked about this while we were watching the movie, that these scenes, a lot of nothing is happening. Like we're seeing a couple families chatting. We're seeing a kid make a sandcastle. We're seeing somebody put suntan lotion on. There's not a lot of things happening. And I think it's why you and I right now are talking through this plot so quickly, is because there aren't too many plot points, even though I could not get through them in 30 seconds. Like Spielberg just chooses to fill a lot of time with I don't want to say nothing because I just said that, but like
Yeah,
it's
I
like
mean, to say to
B-roll
say nothing.
almost.
Yeah, I mean, to say there's nothing. I think there's actually quite a bit of activity going on, like especially in like the Brody's first scene on the beach. For the second attack, there's constantly people walking in front of him, obscuring his vision.
Mhm.
He's trying to look out and see if anything is happening, and like then there's the one scene where he sees the girl start to thrash around, and then all of a sudden he realizes, oh, it's just her boyfriend or whatever who's gotten under her.
Mhm.
So he's filling it. Actually, it's not a lot of scary activity, but it's a lot of pretty normal activity,
Mhm.
and it's kind of just setting the stage for this is a normal day at the beach that's about to be horribly interrupted.
Right. But you're also, and I don't know about you, but like I definitely felt on edge because I'm the audience. I know this is about a killer shark. I know the movie's not over. So like I'm waiting for it, and maybe it's that same anxiety. I mean, to get super deep, but like you're feeling the anxiety that like Brody's feeling and Matt
Yeah,
Hooper is feeling because they
absolutely.
know what is coming or what could come. I mean, they don't want it to happen, obviously, but they're feeling, pretty confident something crazy might happen because they have all this protection happening and they on guard. Brody tells his son not to take the boat into the water. He wants him to go over into the pond area instead. So it's just a
And
lot of like
of
tense
course,
moments.
shit does go sideways,
Yep.
but there
Oh
is,
my
of
god.
course, a fake out.
Yes. Oh my
So,
god. So that scene is so interesting to me. I need your thoughts on this. This was such an
okay.
interesting scene.
You have all the underwater shots that we're kind of used to in this movie by now. They tend to, indicate that danger is afoot. But conspicuously absent is the dun 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 music.
Right. That
And
is
so
so
when you see the
true.
shark fin, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, it's just a bunch of punk kids who decided to play a prank.
Meanwhile, I still felt like, oh my god, this is it, even though I didn't hear the
Hmm.
dun dun music. So it's crazy going back. And I mean, for someone like you who has seen this movie before, you knew it was kids, to like notice something like that. I didn't, like, my subconscious did not even say like, oh, it's okay. Like, because
Was the
there's a
dun
shark
dun
in it.
music playing in your mind as you were watching this
It
scene?
probably was. I mean, let's be real. Like, that is, everybody knows that song. I mean, when I say
But
song,
then,
I
of
mean
course,
those two notes.
yeah. But then, of course, the song does play for real this time.
Yes, but not before we see like the, because when the kids are playing that prank, we see this like mob trampling Black
Oh, that's
Friday
right. Yeah.
back in 2005 moment. Like, everybody's running. We watch old people get trampled. Unnecessary. I didn't need to see that. I already watched a kid die, and they already implied that a dog died. Like, I didn't need to see trampled old man. So we see all this crazy town, but then we have this young girl screaming, "There's a shark in the pond," but like barely screaming because apparently we can't scream loudly in this movie. I don't know. But there is a shark in the pond, and it's, I'm not gonna lie, I laughed a little bit when he's like kind of rowing. He's like, "Hey, you kids all right over there?" And then gets totally wrecked.
Yeah, it's headed right towards Chief Brody's son.
Yep.
And, poor guy who stopped to just give them some sailing advice
Yeah.
is now loses a leg and presumably his life.
Oh, dun dun dun. This poor man. He's just trying to be nice. Yeah, it was just like, it was a kind of a funny scene. It was like, oh man. You kind of saw it coming. Once you knew there was a
Hmm.
shark in the pond, I don't know how you felt, but I did not think that the kid was gonna get, like, his son was gonna die. First of all, we have already seen a kid die in this movie. We did not need another kid. But then, of course, we could have had a great like Jaws 2 moment, Revenge of the Jaw, when like Brody finally mans up and decides, I am going to go in the water. I'm going to avenge my son's death. Like, we could have really seen a twist in the plot on
Yeah,
that
I
one.
mean, he kind of still does that anyway. The fact that his son is like injured and goes into shock is definitely what
Mhm.
prompts him to grab the mayor and say, "Hey, sign this thing."
Yeah, he just is like, okay, I have changed my mind. You, mayor, need to sign this that we are going to hire Quint for $10,000. And he's like, yeah, but money. And then he's like, well, my kid was also in the water. It's like, great. Also, please sign this thing. Like, we're gonna hire him. Awesome. So then we cut to them like on a boat. We get to know Quint a little bit better. He's like very sailory. He's singing his little shanties and maybe is drunk. Who knows?
I mean, he's got that apparently putrid, like homemade booze that he tries to get Brody to drink there.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And I don't know if you've ever had someone else's like homemade Everclear, but it is it's hard. It's real hard. So, very funny scene. I do love the subplot of these two, kind of like my way versus my way.
You mean
There
Clinton
is no
Hooper?
compromise. Yes. There is no compromise. Like, I love when they have the little like uncomfortable like bro down where Quint like pounds a beer and crushes the can in his hand, and then Matt like chugs his small glass of water and crushes the plastic cup. Like, it is pretty solid.
That is a great moment. Yeah.
And like, they come together in the towards the end because they sing drunken sea tunes together.
Yeah, they
But
have that great scene at night where they're all comparing scars,
oh my
and
god,
then we get
yes.
the famous USS Indianapolis speech.
Yes, talk to me about this speech. I have a fun fact, but I think you have a fun fact too.
Yeah, so this Robert Shaw helped write that speech, and it is a true story that actually happened, and that story was actually the basis for another movie that was released a few years ago, starring Nicolas Cage, the one and only. It is called USS Indianapolis: Men of Courage. I have not seen it, but it has been featured on a few bad movie podcasts that I listen to. So
Uh-oh.
it's probably not great, but I mean that might be a great project to watch that movie.
I
And
love all things bad movies, and I mean Nicolas Cage plus bad movie, you can't go wrong.
no, not at all.
I mean, I guess you can't go wrong because it's Nicolas Cage and a bad movie. But that is very curious because we were talking about this as we were watching it. We weren't sure if it was scripted or not. Turns out it was, which is very, very cool. I found out, because this is something I was thinking about. I'm like, man, he plays a very solid drunk man. Like, I feel like acting drunk is really hard because acting drunk, you just kind of look dumb versus actually being drunk. So I kind of had a sneaking suspicion that he maybe had a little help with this little piece, if you catch my drift.
Oh yeah.
It turns out he tried that, and so they Shaw asked if he could have a drink or if he could drink before the scene, and they said, yeah, sure. He got so incredibly wasted that he couldn't get through his lines. And so they had to reshoot the next day. So we went a little, I was about to say overboard, but I'll use it. Went a little overboard there. And so he had to actually reshoot the scene, but it obviously came out very, very good.
This is definitely a movie where almost anything that could go wrong did go wrong. They had the malfunctioning shark, which was, kind of the star of the movie. They
Mhm.
had to deal with all the tides that were making shooting difficult, and one of the stars of the movie was also completely shit-faced.
Yes, I think it really is almost the true story of hunting down a shark. Speaking of almost true story, I found out too that the ship that they're on, the Orca, actually sank for real during filming, not like during the actual sinking scene, but like during filming, the ship started to sink and they actually ended up damaging a ton of the footage that they had shot that day, but they rushed it to like the movie hospital basically in New York and they ended up saving it. So like talk about like you said real life like everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Like they almost lost a whole day's worth of shooting because they they sank their boat. So this I don't know how this movie did so well considering all of these signs of doom, but here we are.
Sometimes it's just meant to be.
I guess so. I mean, it's lasted this long.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, they're on the boat. They do all these crazy things. They're as Quint has his like reel hooked up to the side of the boat and it starts clicking. And now we've got some tension building because oh my god, we caught the shark. The shark goes under the boat, it goes next to the boat, the line snaps. Like there's all these almost moments from kind of this point forward that kind
Hmm.
of lead towards the end of the movie. So we first have this one where we almost get the shark, but then the line snaps. Then they shoot him with a harpoon and they have the barrel that is supposed to kind of keep him afloat and prevent him from diving, but he slips away from that. He comes back. Like we see this kind of back and forth of like, when is he actually going to get this shark? Is he going to actually get this shark? We also have we're going to need a bigger boat line, which I learned was
Yes,
from this
okay, that
movie.
was the best part of this viewing experience for me was you having the realization, this is the you're gonna need a bigger boat movie.
Yes,
Like when
I kind of had a feeling this was the boat the movie for that line. I was just unsure like what was going to be happening around it. I thought maybe like the shark was going to like jump up Free Willy style and we would be like, "Oh my god, we need a bigger boat." But and I was
no, it's a
close.
much better moment than that.
It is
Much better
better.
moment than that.
It is much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah,
I
that was
did
a very satisfying moment for me, seeing you realize that this is the you're gonna need a bigger boat movie.
I am so glad that I could bring you joy. I did find out that now iconic line was actually ad-libbed. Like that was not in the script. And
Yes.
I guess during screen tests, the audience were like freaking out because they see this giant shark. So all of the screams of the audience drowned out this line. And so Spielberg went back and like re-edited that piece so that you could actually hear, "We're gonna need a bigger boat."
And an
Um,
immortal moment was born.
I think he
It's
knew.
like
He
it
knew.
is like a work of just understated genius, that line.
I mean, it just has so many meanings within so many different contexts
Yeah,
generally.
it's kind of like their Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, that is a great point. And again, another iconic line that I will use for the
Yeah.
rest of my life. Um, but this was a part I actually wrote a note to myself as we're seeing kind of this back and forth between basically the rest of this movie kind of goes dramatic shark scene, bro scene slash character development, dramatic shark scene, bro scene slash character development. So in this whole piece though, I would say almost second half of the movie, maybe a little bit the last third of the movie, the music is like adventure-y. It's like
Hmm.
we're going to go get the shark. It's not this tense, oh my gosh, we are up against this man-eating machine that is this
No, it's
unknown in the
very,
water.
very swashbuckly.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
mean, like Quint is kind of a pirate character as
Yes.
well. Like I mean, 'cause, I mean, one of the big influences on this movie that Spielberg has talked about is it's highly influenced by Hitchcock. But
Okay.
I think you can also see, in this last half of the movie, you can definitely see like the old, adventure serials creeping in that of course he would later adapt and, use as inspiration for the Indiana Jones movies.
Yeah, you
There
definitely
is
feel that.
mhm. for
in this
sure.
piece. Yeah, so it's very like we're the three musketeers. We're going to go find this shark and there's points of drama, but we're going to avail, but they kind of don't. There's an
Yeah.
attack on the boat and then this is like again another attack on the boat. At this point we have I believe one barrel, maybe two in the shark at this point. It's hard to keep track in my notes because it keeps going back and forth between happy moments and scary moments. But the shark starts attacking the boat. It kind of starts to fill up with water a little bit. Like now we have lots of threats because not only do we have the threat of the shark that we cannot kill for some reason, we have now our boat is sinking. But instead we're going to like drink and get super wasted and sing songs, but it's fine. We have priorities. Um
I mean, I
Brody
do think that the boat does not start sinking until after that scene. I think it starts sinking like on the next day.
That's what I was confused about because
Yeah.
like the shark attacks the boat and we see kind of some cracking and some water coming in and I'm like, "Wait, doesn't this mean the boat's sinking?" But apparently we were still good for a
Yeah,
while.
there is a moment where he goes, "We're gonna sink, aren't we?"
And it's like,
Like,
"Well,
yeah, and I
yeah,
can't quite remember when that comes in, but yeah. And so yeah, the boat is sinking. So what's the only thing they can do at this point?
get
Get the shark cage
wasted."
out.
Oh, never
Oh, I
mind.
was gonna say get the shark cage out. I
Priorities.
mean that too. That too.
Also get wasted. They do that.
Yeah,
Yes. So at this
they
point
do.
when they get the
They do
shark cage
both things.
out, they they get wasted, they share their scar stories. Matt Hooper has this really stupid line where he's like, "She broke my heart," and I'm like, that's very very dumb. So then we've got more like dun dun music. I'm looking at my notes now and I just keep seeing dun dun music, dun dun music, dun dun music, and so clearly we are in the dramatic part of this adventure movie that we're watching. This is actually where the shark starts following the boat. Like they're trying to kind of like lure the shark back to shallow waters
Yeah,
to
they're trying
essentially.
to drown it, I believe, as they say.
Yes, I
They're
was going
trying
to
to get
say.
it close enough so that it's going to like beach itself, basically.
Yeah, so they're like trying to outpace this great white shark. Um and clearly that's not going to work, right? Like they burn out the boat. You kind of have a moment and I literally just watched Titanic, so I'm feeling a very similar vibe of like we need to make this boat go faster and it's like no, we can't push it that hard. It will break and sink and it's like no, we have to. Like it was like a very similar moment for me. Um and so they burn out the boat unsurprisingly. Uh and I wrote in my notes because right before this, we have Brody trying to call the Coast Guard because he's like, fuck this, I'm out. This shark has barrels in it and it's still not going down. Like, we got to call the Coast Guard. And Quint just is like, nope, and smashes this thing. Now, granted, we have gone hours, almost maybe day without communication seemingly because he broke the communicator and nobody has come out looking for them presumably like we're cool like we're just like
I
it's
mean,
fine.
I think that he destroys the radio, and I think that's on the same day that Hooper goes down in the cage.
Oh,
I
okay,
think that's
for me
just
it felt
I
like
believe that's
years.
yeah, I believe that's just hours before that happens.
Okay,
'Cause that's
now I'll
kind of one of
forgive
the
everyone
inciting
else.
yeah, I think that's one of the inciting incidents that leads them to deciding that Hooper needs to go down in the cage
Yes,
because
absolutely.
they're dead in the water, they have no communication, they have no way to get out. So the only way they're going to survive this is if Hooper can go down and kill the shark himself.
Absolutely. And so he goes into his shark cage. And of course, I Googled how did they shoot the shark scene in Jaws? Because this
Oh, that
is
one shark scene.
just the one. There was only one in this movie. Because this is 1975, and admittedly, as many can probably suppose, I don't have a ton of knowledge of technology in movies at this time because I don't have the cultural reference around it. And so I was a little like shooting this movie in 2020. There's effects, there's green screens, there's everything you could want to shoot a scene like this and not have to even put a person underwater, let alone put them near a shark. But it
Yeah, I mean
turns
they shot Aquaman where basically the whole movie is underwater, and I don't think they went underwater once,
which is
which is kind of a
crazy.
ripoff. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, also, I mean, if you're in the water, you just get a little wet. Go in like a small kiddie pool. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the Aquaman's episode of this show.
Oh, God forbid.
Uh, so I found out that they flew out to Australia to shoot some like B-roll of actual sharks to weave into the scene. Why Australia? Couldn't tell you. Don't know why we had to go all the way there. There are sharks everywhere, but they decided to go to Australia. And they decided to shoot like sharks swimming around so that they could get B-roll of kind of a more authentic looking shark swimming and looking menacing instead of like an animatronic shark like being pushed in the water kind of a thing. And they actually brought a cage out and they did put an actor in it, but they want, this is what I think cracks me up the most. They're like, oh, we need to make these sharks in Australia look bigger. So let's hire a 4'9" horse jockey, stick him in a smaller cage as a stunt double, and just make people think that the shark is bigger because everything else is smaller. And
Oh, that kind of
honestly,
rules. I did not know that.
like, and I kind of felt this vibe, like, when I was watching the scene, I'm like, that doesn't look like him. Like, his face doesn't look the same. But I'm like, well, we've seen him with glasses, so I just kind of let it go. But now it's like, oh, that was so not even close to being him. Like,
I
it
mean, his
was
face is mostly obscured by
right.
the scuba gear as
And I think
well.
that's why they were like banking on it.
Hmm.
So that is, I think, hilarious. And then when they were doing these days in Australia to shoot all these scenes, they were trying to get the shark to attack the cage, obviously, because they wanted some B-roll of a true shark attacking an actual cage. And they were trying to coerce it with bait, but these sharks were like super apathetic, I guess. And they just like would not actually take this bait. So that
At
was
that point, I wonder if like the crew just goes, "Man, the premise of this movie is flawed."
yeah, do they call Steven Spielberg and be like, "Hey man, I don't think sharks are like gonna attack people." Like, what? So they were just like super apathetic. Maybe things are different in Australia, you know? They're just like chilling with the dingoes and stuff. But the scene where the shark is kind of stuck and like writhing that you see in the movie, that is actually a real shark, and they did not like intentionally shove a shark within the cables. Apparently, during this part where they're trying to get the bait in the cage to get them to attack the cage, a shark just swam on like over the top of the cage, but got itself stuck a little bit and just like flipped a shit. And so they were like, oh, we just got to take this. But the problem was the stunt double was not in the cage when that happened. And so I learned, this is like the coolest fact I've ever learned about any movie so far in the show. They actually rewrote the script because Matt was supposed to die in this scene. But they're like, well, wait, we really like this one piece of footage we have. Let's just write it so that Matt somehow gets out of the cage and saves himself. And that's why he's not in the cage when we see this happen. So, like, the
Oh,
whole
that's
script's
interesting.
changed because of one shark in Australia.
That is very cool. I did know. So he does die in the book. I kind of assumed that they just wrote him to live because Richard Dreyfuss is just a much more likable character
That's
as
fair.
or he makes him a much more likable character than he was in the book. So they just let him live because we don't we see Quint die later. We don't need both of them to go. But okay, that is interesting. That's really really interesting.
Yeah. So like he wasn't supposed to, I mean, it was supposed to follow that plot line from the book. And now Hooper's still alive, which is crazy. And so I actually took the time now knowing that to rewatch the scene, and you can very much tell like what is the animatronic shark. Obviously, any of the scenes where we see kind of like a demon shark like coming up to the cage, you can definitely tell that it's like the fake animatronic one. But you can
Hmm.
see like some kind of Discovery Channel type shots like of just the shark like swimming by, and that's a real shark. So go check it out. That's my really really cool fact for this movie.
That ranks as one of the coolest facts, I would say. So
So yes, Matt Hooper was actually supposed to die in the movie as well, but a shark in Australia saved him, which is very kind of cool.
he owes that shark his life, kind of
Yes.
ironically.
Oh my goodness. And they're so gentle. They're so gentle. But then he kind of gets lost for a little bit, but then there is like we're like right at the end of the movie, it's the climax of the shark attack fight scene where it's essentially just Quint and Brody still left on the boat. Matt is
At this
presumably
point,
dead. What was that?
well, I mean, they think he's dead. We know he's still alive because we
Right,
saw him
absolutely.
swim
I was gonna
away.
say they
Yeah,
pull up the cage
that's right.
and
Yeah.
there's nothing in it, and so they presume that he was eaten by a shark, which is very sad. But they kind of move on emotionally very quickly because the
Well, they're
shark is
kind of
attacking the
forced
boat.
to. Yeah.
Right.
The shark has officially had it with all this shit. It was playing
Yes.
around before, but now it's done.
And again, back to my earlier point about like a shark is evil, like this is the plot point that like of all plot points that's really annoying, that it's like this shark, I'm not a shark expert, just to put it out there. But I have to believe that a shark would not be like, these men, I'm going to finish them off. Like I don't think
No,
that
but I
that's how
do
sharks
but I
work.
do think there's something to be said for the fact that the shark would recognize that it's being hunted, and it's because it's had, harpoons shot at it, at least, roughly half a dozen harpoons have been shot into the shark.
Yeah.
Those things probably hurt.
Hmm. And Matt
So
was trying to like stab it when he was in the cage.
right. So I think that there is something to be said for the fact that the shark is aware that this gigantic floating thing is trying to kill it,
Hmm.
and
That's
now it's
true.
going to try to kill it back.
Right. So he's fighting instead of
Hmm.
flighting
Yes.
because he's a
And he
shark.
just kind of demolishes the boat in kind of like one fell swoop almost.
Yeah. So, like I said, they have to emotionally move on very quickly because they are about to die. And unfortunately, Quint cannot survive because the shark
No.
attacks the back end of the boat and kind of starts to sink it. And it just, it was a real,
Yeah.
it
He
was a,
suffers again, a very gruesome death for what we would consider a PG movie.
I mean, there was blood coming out of his mouth. Like, and I know that that can happen when you die, when you're bit by a shark, I guess, but like, I didn't need to see that. That was a lot going on.
Yeah, as we've said several times in this episode, Quint now is very, very dead.
He's so dead. So dead. Like, so very dead. So many people died in this movie, in the making of this movie. I'm kidding. Nobody
I
died in the
mean,
making of this
fewer than you'd think, though. Honestly, like the body count is not high. It's like I want to say like the on-screen deaths are probably only like four, maybe five. I'm trying to think.
That is true. There is, like I said, the implied dog death, but
Yeah, and then
otherwise,
there's the dead body, there's the severed head, but we don't see that person die.
that
I
is
think there's only
true.
like four on-screen deaths in this movie.
That's a good point. And see, that's the thing is going into this movie, knowing it was about a killer shark, I thought I was just going to see like left and right, like people dying, just like I don't even know who that character is and they're dead, like that kind of a vibe. But you're right. We really didn't see too many. So that's, I think, maybe why the tension was high the whole
Yeah,
movie,
definitely.
because it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't predictable, but it wasn't so haphazard
Yeah.
and all these things.
No, it's a very deliberate movie.
Everything is deliberate. I think that's a really good way to describe it, because even going back to like talking about those scenes where we see it's a normal day, like all of those shots were deliberate. Like even
Yeah.
though there's not a lot of action happening, like oh, it's setting the scene but also building tension at the exact same time, which is really crazy when you think about it, that you can build tension with watching a kid building a sandcastle.
Yeah, it's masterful. Those scenes are really, really masterfully done.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although I was wrong, so there's not just four on-screen deaths. There is one more big one that we have to get to.
Oh, of course. So I was going to say, so then we see Quint die, sadly, and the boat is slowly sinking. And this is Chief Brody's time, I guess, to like, as you mentioned earlier, overcome his fear of water and boats, even though we are well past that, my friend, because we have been in a boat and it is now
Little
sinking
late for that, but
like the entire movie. All I wrote was such drama in all caps during this scene. Um, it is just a lot of drama, a lot of like, when is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? Like, I don't know. As the audience member, I'm like, the shark's going to die because all movies have happy endings. That's what Disney
well,
taught me.
he choreographs it pretty well because you see him shove the canister into the shark's mouth,
Hmm.
and so you're like, okay, that's definitely going to be the mechanism by which the shark dies.
See, here's the thing. You say it like everyone would have caught that. I did not catch that at
Okay.
all. So as I'm watching and we see the shark swimming, and I'm like, oh, you're going to shoot at it with this shotgun? Like, LOL. We just tried a million other things. Like, good luck, bud. And then I even see the canister in his mouth. It does not put it together for me, like, at all. So what I have learned by watching this movie is that I would not do well in a shark attack situation. Like, I would not be resourceful, apparently. I would not do well. I would probably end up being Quint. truly. So you put it together that the canister, because there was kind of a foreshadowing where Matt Hooper is like, dude, don't touch these canisters. They could blow up at any second. Who remembered that? Not me.
Yep,
That's for sure.
definitely Chekhov's gun right there.
Yep. So he pulls out like a shotgun, and then a line that I admittedly had never heard of, but I think this is kind of a famous line, the "smile you son of a bitch" line. Oh my goodness. But yes, so there's drama. We see the ship kind of sinking. It's like now flipped on its side, and he's like leaning on the, and I don't know, and I know my producer Sean, who sails boats, is going to be so mad because I don't know what that thing is that sticks up from the thing, and it has the sail on it, and I can't remember what it's called, and I know he's going to send me a message. It's called a
The
mast.
mast.
So he like decides like, okay, I'm gonna like climb up the mast, and he's kind of leaning on it as it's sinking, and it's like, this is your last shot, and he does successfully shoot the tank, and it's like, yay. But then there's this moment of like, truly, now what? We have a dead giant shark that blew up into small bits. We have shark meat all over the place. We see the ship is sinking. Like, what are we going to do? And he's just out there. But then, of course, who floats up to the surface? It's Matt. He's okay. Yay. Yay. He's okay.
And I
And
kind of love how he just like, Quint, and he just goes, no. And they don't like mourn him at all. They're kind of just like, he was kind of an asshole anyway.
again, we have to be, because we're men, we just shove our emotions way down deep,
That
all the
might be
way
it too.
down, all the way down, all the way down. Honestly, I think I'd need to come up with another podcast, just how therapy would help so many male characters in all of these movies I've been watching, because like these plot lines would be so different with therapy, like so much different. But I
I mean, I
digress.
would personally need a ton of therapy if I just went through what they did.
Absolutely. I think
Like
that they need it.
they kind of show him just kind of like laying there on the mast as it's sinking, and you're kind of, and I remember you kind of being just like, I mean, how is he just sitting there as like the boat is sinking around? I'm just like, he's probably exhausted.
Probably.
He's like, I'm gonna take a minute. I'm gonna take a minute before I swim all the way to shore. I've just killed a man-eating shark.
Yep.
I've just blown it up in like spectacular fashion. I need a minute.
And I mean, but I see, again, I would not do well in a shark attack. I would be panicking. Pure
Yeah.
panic. Pure panic. But then Matt shows up and he's like, hey, bud. They suppress their emotions for Quint. They get on like a makeshift raft out of the barrels. And he says, you know, I never did like the water. And then the movie just ends. And that's the end of the movie. It's the whole movie. It's a really,
It's a 2-hour movie.
it's a 2-hour movie, and that is the end of it. It's just like, and that's it. You just see them kind of kicking towards the shore, and then the credits roll. It was a very interesting choice for an ending. But you know what? I'm glad that I have finally checked it off the list.
Yeah, I mean, where else are you going to go after you've blown up a gigantic shark like that? I mean, what more could you put into this movie? I think anything else would just be superfluous and would get left on the cutting room floor.
Absolutely. And
Like,
again,
I don't think we need like any scenes of them coming home, like in The Return of the King, which went on for like a half an hour
fair, because
longer. Yeah.
they don't need like what's going to happen. The mayor's
Yeah.
like, thank goodness we can keep the beaches open. Hooray. But it just ends. So I always try to help folks like me who have not seen the movie and want to make it sound like they've seen the movie by kind of highlighting the things that they should know. So I think one of them is obviously we're going to need a bigger boat. And the context behind that is when Chief Brody sees the shark for the first time, this killer shark, and is like basically understanding, hey, we literally need a bigger boat. It's not a metaphor. I know it's now used as a metaphor, but it literally is, we need a bigger boat.
And he says it a few more times throughout the movie too.
He does do that. I mean, he
Yeah.
definitely wants to give up many a time in this
Yeah.
movie,
Yeah.
which I don't blame him. And
No.
I meant to bring this up. Why is the police chief on this trek in the first place?
I think, well, I don't have a great answer, but I mean, I have to assume, like, what else is he going to do? He's the police chief of Amity Island, you know, where they I think they state several times how like there's like no crime here. He's moved here from New York, and he's like not doing his. I mean, what else is his job but to go out and hunt sharks that have been killing the citizens of his town?
I
Like the
guess.
shark is probably the biggest criminal they've had in this
This
town in
feels
like
very
decades.
like this is like the epitome of other duties as assigned.
Yeah, sure.
Like go on a boat and go find a killer shark in this tiny, tiny boat with this creepy fisherman.
Fair.
So that is a key point that you should take away from Jaws. Obviously, the score, I think it goes without saying, the
Hmm.
Dunna 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 song. Um, but I mean, otherwise, you really got to see it for yourself. Like, I can't even accurately like portray the death scenes that are actually like not as hokey as I thought they were going to be.
No, they're
Um,
very well done.
and it's I mean, really, if you want a really kind of niche moment to make it really sound like you've seen this movie, run your nails down a chalkboard and then say, "I'll kill it for 10." And everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, you definitely saw Jaws."
Or watch SpongeBob SquarePants.
That's also true. Which
Yeah,
I've
there is a reference to Sponge that I can't quite remember the context, but there is definitely an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants where they reference that scene.
I was gonna say now I'm just really excited to kind of see it in the wild because I know that this movie has been referenced kind of more subtly than like Shark Attack in the Water in so many other places. So I am very excited to check that out.
Hmm. And now
And
you
now
know anytime you hear you're going to need a bigger boat, you will think Jaws.
and that I literally need a bigger boat. And if anyone says, "Smile, you son of a bitch," I'm going to know that they're not calling me a son of a bitch. In fact, they're just trying to make my face explode. That's really what they want.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
That'd
I
be that
think
would be a great like catchphrase if you were like a family portrait photographer. If there's a kid who's just like
oh,
not sitting still, just like smile, you son of a bitch.
that's it.
That's like
Chief Brody's photography school
that's definitely what he should
tagline.
do after he inevitably retires from being the chief of police on Amity Island.
That's well, no, and then he sets up just like a photo booth on Amity Island called "Smile, you son of a bitch."
I love it. Yeah,
Jaws 3. You heard it here first.
there's already been a Jaws 3, Jaws 5.
Jaws.
It's what
We're at Jaws like 8 at this point with all these ideas. One of them's a
no.
musical. Who knows? Who knows? Oh my goodness. Well, I think it definitely lived up to the hype. Thank you for taking me on this ridiculous adventure to Amity Island in the depths of the ocean through
My
a shark
pleasure.
attack. I
I'm so glad
so
I got to be there for your first time watching this movie.
Thank you so much for joining Matt and I on this crazy ride. In the show notes, we actually have a link to Matt's blog reviewing Jaws, so definitely go check it out.
It's more of a retrospective than a review. I don't think the reviews are in. It's a good movie.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited. Definitely, listeners, go check it out. And I am very excited for next week because we will be watching Pulp Fiction. So see you then.
Jackie Watches Stuff is supported by our listeners. I'd like to thank our supporters in the Academy on Patreon for their generous and ongoing support of the show. Thanks to Paul H. and Brianna S. and Jarrett S., Thomas S., and Linda V. and Missy V. Thanks again. If you'd like to join the Academy and get a shout out for supporting us, visit patreon.com/JackieWatchesStuff. You can also support the show by submitting a review on iTunes or sharing us with your family and friends. Jackie Watches Stuff is hosted by Jackie Vitrano and produced by me, Sean Flynn. You can find me on Twitter @WXGeek. Jackie Watches Stuff is available wherever fine podcasts are sold, or listen online at JackieWatchesStuff.com. Send us your thoughts on Jaws on Twitter. We're @JackieWatches. Thanks for listening. Join us next time when Jackie watches Pulp Fiction.